In the hush of a desert morning, when the wind has not yet chosen its direction and the sun lingers below the horizon, there stands a door half buried in sand. It does not announce itself. It does not gleam. It waits. Its stones are pale and worn, pressed together so precisely that no blade of light slips between them. Grains of dust rest in their shallow grooves as if they have settled there for centuries, reluctant to move. It is said that time leans differently against such doors. Not with urgency, not with hunger, but with a kind of quiet respect. The doorway does not open onto a courtyard or a palace hall. It opens onto silence. Some believe it was sealed in haste. Others whisper that it was sealed in ceremony, the final gesture in a ritual meant to outlast empires. What did they mean to hide so carefully that even the sun was denied entry? Why press stone against stone, then bury it beneath drifting dunes, as though protecting something too sacred for daylight? The wind moves softly across the desert floor, and the sand shifts in slow spirals around the threshold. There are no banners here now, no guards, no royal procession, only the breath of the earth and the faint outline of a gate that once marked a passage between worlds. Let us imagine gently that the sand parts, not with violence, not with discovery shouted across history, but with patience, as if the desert itself exhales and reveals what it has guarded. The stones remain cool to the touch. The seam of the door, once invisible, becomes a narrow shadow. And slowly, as though guided by unseen hands, the threshold opens. Beyond it, air waits, air that has not known the sun. We descend. The steps are shallow and carved directly into limestone, each one worn smooth by careful feet. There is no rush in this descent. The deeper we move, the more the outside world dissolves. The brightness of the sky fades. The scent of sand and heat is replaced by something older, mineral still, almost oceanic in its quiet. Torches flicker in memory, though none burn now. Their imagined glow dances along walls etched with symbols and star-marked lines. The chamber is neither vast nor narrow. It is proportioned with intention, measured in breadth. It is said that artisans once labored here for years, perhaps decades. Their hands traced curves of boats sailing toward unseen horizons. Figures stand in profile, offering incense to gods whose names have dissolved into dust. The gods themselves appear serene, celestial, framed by spirals and sun disks and veiled wings. Each carving is patient, each line deliberate. The stone remembers the rhythm of chisels, striking with devotion rather than haste. And yet, as our eyes adjust to the imagined dimness, we notice something else. Some walls remain untouched. Wide stretches of limestone lie blank and smooth, as though waiting for images that never came. No hieroglyphs fill their surface, no star charts or sacred prayers, just open stone, pale and unmarked. A contradiction lingers here. Why such care in one place, and then such restraint in another? Why adorn certain walls with elaborate celestial processions, then leave others silent? Whispers tell us that absence can be as meaningful as inscription. Perhaps the blankness was intentional, a space for what could not be carved, a chamber within the chamber, one that required no symbols, no guidance. Beneath the silence of stone, there may have been truths meant to be felt rather than recorded. We move further inward. At the center of the room rests a stone platform. Not grand, not towering. It rises only slightly above the floor, aligned carefully with the cardinal directions. Marked by the moon, some might say. Positioned beneath a shaft in the ceiling so narrow it appears accidental, yet perfectly angled. At certain times of year, when the moon stands in a particular place in the sky, a beam of silver light would descend through that opening and fall precisely upon the platform's surface. It is said that on those nights the chamber was not dark at all, but illuminated by celestial breath. What was placed there? A sarcophagus of carved granite, perhaps, or a vessel of sealed scrolls, or nothing at all, only the light itself, invited to rest for a few sacred hours before retreating back to the sky. Royal ambition often seeks eternity. Kings and queens have built pyramids and temples, monuments that scrape the horizon. Yet here, beneath the dust of kings, ambition feels quieter, almost intimate. The chamber does not boast, it does not declare power, instead it hums with patience. We trace the echo of footsteps that once crossed this floor, soft leather sandals, the measured pace of priests, the slower, heavier steps of mourners carrying offerings of oil and grain and red ochre. Their breath would have mingled in the cool air, their voices, hushed and reverent, would have filled the chamber with low, oceanic tones. Perhaps chants rose here, not loud, not theatrical, but steady, a weaving of syllables into something that felt larger than speech. In forgotten corners of the earth, rituals are less about spectacle and more about alignment. Alignment between breath and stone, between mortal hands and celestial cycles. It is said that some tombs were not built merely to house the dead, but to prepare them for a journey among stars. That the walls were maps, not of rivers and deserts, but of constellations and unseen gates. The boats carved in limestone may not have sailed upon water but across the sky, and yet, even if this chamber held a king, even if it guarded scrolls of sacred lore, something else resides here now. Silence. Not the absence of sound, but a presence, a thickness, as though the air itself remembers what it witnessed and chooses not to speak. We linger near the blank walls again. It is possible that the artisans stopped their work abruptly. A war, perhaps, a drought, a shifting dynasty. Or perhaps they stopped because they had completed what was necessary, leaving space for what could never be finished. Some believe that the unmarked stone was meant for the future, to be filled by those who understood the chamber's true purpose. But centuries passed. Empires rose and crumbled. The desert advanced, grain by grain, until the door vanished beneath its veil. And so the chamber rested. Above it kings were forgotten, names once spoken with awe dissolved into myth, monuments eroded, cities were reclaimed by sand and wind. But beneath it all, the sealed room waited, not impatient, not sorrowful, simply still. There is something deeply human in this act of sealing, to create a space so carefully, then close it away. It is as though the builders knew that meaning sometimes requires absence, that what is hidden may endure longer than what is displayed. We move once more to the center of the chamber. Imagine the moonbeam returning, centuries after the door was buried. It slips through the narrow shaft, untouched by sand or politics. It falls upon the stone platform exactly as it once did, indifferent to whether a king rests there or only dust. The light does not discriminate between glory and emptiness. Perhaps that is the true secret beneath the dust of kings, that time and starlight move without preference. That the chamber was never meant to preserve power, but to remind its builders of their smallness beneath celestial order. The deeper we move into this thought, the more the silence thickens. It is not threatening, not dramatic. It does not demand revelation. It simply surrounds us, like cool water. In such silence the mind begins to soften. Questions lose their sharp edges. What did they hide? Why seal the door? Was it treasure, or fear, or devotion? Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the act of sealing was the final line in a sacred story, a gesture that said, enough. That said, what is within has completed its purpose. As we begin to ascend, slowly, back toward the imagined threshold, the air warms almost imperceptibly. The scent of dust returns. The wind hums faintly beyond the door. The chamber remains below, untouched by our curiosity. We step back into the desert morning. The sand shifts once more, covering the seam. The stones settle into their ancient embrace. Behind every closed gate of the past, time waits patiently. Not speaking, not fully silent, simply present, like a breath held between worlds. And as the sun finally rises over the dunes, its light glides across the place where the door rests beneath dust. No marker announces it, no sign invites entry, only the quiet understanding that some truths are not lost. They are resting, and they will echo softly when we are ready to listen. A city burns softly in the mind, not with roaring flame, not with the clash of swords or the thunder of collapsing walls, but with drifting embers beneath a pale and watchful moon. The fire is almost gentle in memory. It moves slowly, like breath across parchment. It glows where cedar shelves once stood, where scrolls once rested in quiet rows. At the heart of that city, veiled now in dust and centuries, there stood a library, not merely a building, but a sanctuary. It is said that the library rose near the sea, where ships from distant horizons arrived heavy with grain, spices, and questions. In forgotten corners of the earth, people believed that knowledge itself was sacred, that to gather words was to gather light. And so they built halls of stone and cedar, marked by columns that caught the sun by day and the moon by night. But our journey does not begin with its fall. It begins with a single parchment. Imagine it unrolled beneath lamplight. The flame is small and steady, casting a golden circle upon the page. Inked across its surface are careful lines, stars mapped into spirals, constellations named in a language long dissolved into silence. A hand once traced these lines with devotion. A mind once lingered on the thought that the heavens could be understood. The parchment crackles faintly as it shifts. The room is quiet. Outside, the city breathes. Let us wander deeper. The corridors are long and cool. Cedar shelves rise from floor to ceiling, holding scrolls wrapped in linen and bound with simple cord. Each one carries a fragment of the world, a poem from a vanished kingdom, a treatise on the motion of planets, a record of medicinal herbs gathered at dawn. Scholars once walked here in soft sandals, their robes brushing against stone. Their voices were low, almost reverent, as though they feared disturbing the silence between words. It is said that some came from lands so distant that their accents sounded like oceanic echoes within these halls. They gathered maps of the heavens, they studied the breath of the body, they debated the nature of the soul beneath ceilings painted with star-marked patterns. Some believe the library was more than an archive. It was a meeting place of minds, a sacred crossroads where thought itself became pilgrimage. Ships arriving at the harbour were sometimes required to surrender their scrolls for copying. Knowledge was not hoarded here, it was multiplied. And so, beneath cedar beams and flickering lamps, scribes bent over desks copying words with patient hands. The scratch of reed against papyrus was a steady rhythm, like rainfall upon stone. Every letter a gesture of preservation, every scroll a promise that memory would outlast the fragile body. Yet even in this sanctuary, fragility lingered. Papyrus is not stone. Ink fades, wood burns. Whispers tell us that wisdom, no matter how vast, rests upon materials that crumble easily beneath time's touch. And so we come to the contradiction. How could a treasury of thought, guarded by scholars, honored by kings, marked by the moon and the tides, dissolve into smoke? Some say it was a single fire, fierce and sudden, devouring shelves in a night of chaos. Others believe it was not one flame, but many small losses scattered across decades, political tides shifting, funding withdrawn, wars reshaping loyalties, scrolls neglected, forgotten in corners where dust gathered thick. Beneath the silence of history, the truth becomes veiled. Perhaps it was destruction alone, or perhaps it was the quiet erosion that touches all human endeavors. A roof left untended, a door unguarded, a generation less devoted than the last. The library did not vanish in a single breath, it dimmed. And yet, ash is not merely absence, ash is transformation. When cedar shelves collapse into grey powder, their form is lost, but their substance changes. It settles upon the floor, upon the stone, upon the city itself. The fire that consumed the scrolls did not erase the thoughts within them. Many had already traveled, copied, carried, whispered across deserts and seas. A philosopher leaves with a fragment of text tucked into memory. A physician remembers a remedy learned beneath these ceilings. A navigator carries a star map etched not on papyrus, but within his mind. In this way, knowledge becomes like starlight. Even when the star itself has faded, its glow continues to cross the darkness. Let us step outside the imagined ruins. The moon hangs low over the harbor. Smoke drifts upward, thin and pale, merging with night. The library stands wounded, its chambers hollowed by flame. But somewhere beyond the city walls, a young student studies beneath a different lamp. Somewhere, in a monastery marked by stone and silence, a monk copies a text first penned in these halls. Ash settles upon the earth, but ideas rise like breath. It is said that centuries later, in distant lands, scholars would rediscover fragments of thought once housed here. Mathematics refined, astronomy reborn, philosophies reinterpreted. The library, though crumbled, became a quiet ancestor to futures it would never witness. Yet we return gently to the chamber itself. The shelves are gone now in our imagining. Only pillars remain, blackened at their base. Moonlight enters through a fractured ceiling, illuminating drifting dust. The air is cool and still. There is no shouting here, no lament, only the soft recognition that even sacred spaces are bound to time. We kneel where a desk once stood. We trace our fingers across the stone floor, where faint scorch marks linger like faded constellations. Beneath the silence, we sense layers of presence, centuries folded upon one another like pages in a forgotten book. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The library feels less like a grave and more like a threshold, a breath held between worlds. It is easy to mourn what was lost, but perhaps mourning is not the only response. Perhaps the true mystery lies not in how it burned, but in how its spirit endured. Knowledge is more fragile than stone, yes, but it is also more fluid. It slips through cracks. It travels in memory. It hides within metaphor and resurfaces in unexpected places. In forgotten corners of the earth, under different moons and different names, its pages turned again. As the night deepens, we allow the ruins to soften. The outlines blur. The columns become silhouettes against silver sky. The ash cools into dust, and the dust becomes part of the ground. Above, the same constellations that once inspired scholars shimmer quietly. Perhaps a scribe once looked up from his scroll and traced those stars with his eyes, believing they would outlast him. He was right, and perhaps he believed his words might also endure. In ways he could not foresee, they did. We rise slowly from the imagined stone floor. The city, now centuries distant, dissolves into night. The embers fade, the smoke thins. All that remains is moonlight touching dust. The library no longer stands as it once did. Its shelves are gone, its scrolls reduced to fragments, scattered across time. But somewhere in unseen archives of memory, its pages still turn gently in the dark, marked by the moon, carried by breath. Waiting, perhaps, not to be rebuilt, but to be remembered. And as we let the image fade, we do not close the door on loss. We simply rest within the quiet understanding that knowledge, like starlight, moves through shadow without haste. Beneath the silence, beneath the ash, something remains, not fully visible, not fully gone, a soft echo in the chambers of the mind. And perhaps that is enough. On a plateau washed in silver starlight, where the wind moves like a slow and ancient breath, a circle of stones rises from the earth. There are no walls here, no roof to shield the sky, only pillars, tall, weathered, patient, standing in a wide embrace around an open center. It is said that when the night is very still, when even the insects soften their song, you can feel something in that place. Not a presence exactly, but an attention, as though the earth itself is listening. Who stood here first and believed the heavens could answer? The question drifts across the plateau like mist. It does not demand an answer. It simply rests in the air, marked by the moon. We approach slowly, as one might approach a sacred well or a sleeping animal. The stones are larger than a human body, some broader than an outstretched embrace. Their surfaces are cool beneath imagined fingertips, smoothed by rain, carved faintly by wind, brushed by centuries of dust. There are no inscriptions, no carved kings or sacred beasts, no obvious proclamation of power. And yet, there is intention here. Each monolith stands at a deliberate angle, each shadow cast with quiet precision. This is not a random scattering of stone. This is alignment. This is memory pressed into the earth. Some believe the stones were raised 5,000 years ago, perhaps more, by hands that carried no metal, by minds that read the sky as carefully as we read a page. In forgotten corners of the earth, people once knew the constellations not as decoration, but as guides. The heavens were not distant, they were companions. We move quietly among the pillars. The temple does not enclose, it opens. Where most sanctuaries draw a boundary between sacred and ordinary, this one dissolves it. The sky itself becomes the ceiling. The stars become lamps. The moon becomes a wandering priestess, slipping between the stones at appointed hours. It is said that on certain nights of the year, when the moon rises full and pale, its light travels along a precise path between two of the tallest pillars. The beam falls onto a central stone, illuminating it like a gentle crown. Was this architecture a calendar, a prayer, or a bridge between breath and infinity? We stand in the center and look upward. The constellations turn slowly overhead, their spiral patterns repeating year after year. Ancient watchers once stood here, perhaps wrapped in wool and furs, their breath visible in the cool night air. They would have watched the moon drift through the circle, marking time not with ticking devices, but with shadow and light. Where memory fades, stone remembers. The earth below holds the footprints of forgotten watchers. Though grass now covers the soil, beneath it lies a layered history of gatherings. Fires once burned here, small and controlled. Offerings may have been placed upon the central stone. Grain, carved beads, perhaps even simple bowls of water reflecting starlight. Whispers tell us that such places were not built by a single ruler, nor designed by a solitary architect. No written manual survives. No stone bears the signature of its maker. Instead, the temple seems to have grown from communal breath, from a shared belief that the sky held patterns worth honoring. There is mystery in the precision. The stones are aligned not to roads or rivers, but to the rising of particular stars. Some believe that the temple marks the solstice, the longest day and the longest night, when the sun appears at its furthest reach. Others suggest that certain stones frame the rising of bright celestial bodies, guiding agricultural rhythms and migration. Yet beyond practical use, there is something softer here. A listening. In ancient times, when the world felt vast and unpredictable, when storms could flatten fields and winter could linger too long, the sky offered consistency. The moon waxed and waned, the stars returned to their positions. The heavens were a slow and reliable dance. To stand beneath that dance was to feel less alone. Imagine generations gathering here, children seated on the ground, their small hands tracing patterns in dust. Elders pointing upward, naming constellations whose meanings are now veiled. Songs rising into the night, low and steady, oceanic in rhythm. It is said that in some cultures, the stars were believed to be ancestors watching from beyond. In others, they were gateways to other realms. Perhaps the people who built this temple believed that by aligning stone with starlight, they were aligning themselves with something eternal. The temple listens. That is its quiet power. Unlike cathedrals of later centuries, it does not amplify sound. It does not echo with chants. Instead, It absorbs. Wind passes through the circle without resistance. Moonlight drapes itself across the stones. Rain falls without interruption. The structure does not claim dominion over the elements. It welcomes them. We move toward the outer ring and trace the curve of one monolith. Lichen clings to its base. Tiny fractures spider across its surface like delicate veins. Time has not conquered it, but it has softened it. There are no gates here, no threshold to cross, only openness. Some believe that this openness was intentional, a reminder that the sacred does not require walls, that reverence can exist without confinement. The temple was not meant to separate the worshipper from the sky, but to frame the sky, to focus attention. And perhaps that was enough. As we linger in the imagined night, the wind grows gentler. The constellations shift imperceptibly. A shooting star crosses the dark expanse, leaving a faint trail like a whispered secret. What did they ask the heavens? Did they seek answers about harvests, about birth and death, about the turning of seasons? Or did they simply stand in awe, aware that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only witnessed? Beneath the silence, the temple seems to hum, not audibly, not in a way the ear can detect, but in the alignment itself, stone and starlight meeting in quiet agreement. The monoliths do not move, yet they participate in the celestial dance by marking its rhythm. There is something profoundly human in this act, to raise stone toward the sky, to shape earth in response to the cosmos. It is said that long after the original builders were gone, others continued to visit the circle. Different languages spoken, different beliefs whispered, yet the structure endured, patient and receptive. No single voice claims authorship. The temple belongs to time. As dawn approaches in our imagining, the stars begin to fade, one by one. Not abruptly but gently, like candles extinguished by invisible hands. The eastern horizon softens into pale grey. The moon grows faint, surrendering its silver glow. The stones remain. They do not mourn the retreat of starlight. They do not celebrate the coming sun. They stand as they always have, anchored, attentive. A beam of early sunlight slips between two pillars, illuminating the central space. The night's ceremony dissolves into morning. And yet, something lingers. The sense that some structures are less about walls and more about wonder, less about ownership and more about orientation. In the open circle of stone, beneath the veiled sky, time itself seems to bow, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The temple that listened to the stars does not offer us answers. It offers us alignment, a reminder that there was once a place where humans stood in the cold breath of night and believed the heavens could speak. Perhaps they did. Or perhaps the act of listening was the true sacred exchange. As we step away from the plateau, the stones recede into distance. Grass sways around their base. Birds begin their morning calls. The world resumes its ordinary rhythm. But somewhere in the quiet chambers of the mind, the circle remains, marked by the moon, open to the sky, waiting. And as sleep begins to gather at the edges of thought, we carry with us the image of that temple, roofless, patient, listening still. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the temple was never meant to answer. Perhaps it was always meant to teach us how to look up. There is a river that moves as though it remembers something. By day, sunlight trembles across its surface in scattered spirals of gold. By night, it becomes a long ribbon of shadow, marked by the moon and the hush of distant reeds. Its current is slow, almost thoughtful, as if unwilling to disturb what lies beneath. It is said that beneath this quiet water, under layers of green silence and drifting silt, a chamber waits. No sign marks its presence from the shore. No crumbled pillar rises above the surface. The river keeps its secrets well. Yet whispers tell us that long ago, before the banks shifted and the current deepened, there stood a sacred structure at this very edge, a tomb built of stone, aligned to stars, offered to the unseen. What rests below, untouched by air? Let us stand for a moment on the riverbank in imagination. The air is cool with morning breath. Birds call softly from distant branches. The water glides past reeds and stones, carrying fragments of leaves and memory alike. Nothing suggests a hidden chamber, and yet beneath the silence, beneath the flowing mirror of sky, stone endures. Some believe the tomb was built in devotion to a ruler whose name has faded where memory fades. Others suggest it was not for a king, but for a priest or a beloved daughter, or perhaps for something less easily named, a relic, a scroll, a sacred vessel meant to be sealed away from the world. In forgotten corners of the earth, water has often been seen as a threshold, a boundary between the living and the departed. Rivers have been worshipped as deities, feared as judges, trusted as guides. Was this tomb placed near the river as an offering? Or did the river come later, shifting its course in a year of relentless rain, claiming the chamber in a quiet and patient flood? The answer drifts like mist above the current. Now gently we descend, not with urgency, not with force, but as though guided by breath itself. In our imagining, divers slip beneath the surface. The world above dissolves into wavering light. Sound becomes distant, muted, oceanic. The water is cool and green. Particles of silt rise slowly around us, swirling like dust in a sunlit room. Each movement of hand or fin disturbs the sediment, releasing faint clouds that drift upward in soft spirals. There is no rush here. The river slows all things. As we descend further, shapes begin to form in the dimness. A straight line where nature prefers curves, a shadow too symmetrical to be random. And then, unmistakable, stone. Carved pillars rise from the riverbed, their surfaces softened by centuries of current. They are not grand in height, yet they stand upright, anchored, patient. Fish weave between them as if passing through an ancient forest. Light from above filters down in trembling beams, touching edges, illuminating fragments. It is said that the tomb was sealed long before the water claimed it, that its entrance was closed with stone and prayer. And now, beneath the river's surface, it rests in a deeper kind of darkness, one shaped not by night but by depth. We approach the threshold. The doorway, once perhaps marked by inscriptions, is worn smooth. Water has kissed it for generations. There are no sharp edges left, only rounded contours and soft mineral growth clinging like pale lace. Inside, the chamber opens. The ceiling arches gently overhead, carved with care. Though silt covers much of the floor, we glimpse outlines, patterns etched into stone, spirals perhaps, star-marked symbols, faint traces of figures holding offerings toward a sky they could not have known would one day be replaced by water. The air here was once dry, filled with incense and whispered chants. Now it is filled with current. The chamber breathes differently. On a low platform at the center rests a shape half buried in sediment, a sarcophagus perhaps, or a simple stone slab marking the resting place of one who was loved or feared or both. Bowls lie nearby, their rims chipped but intact. Strings of beads, stone, bone, maybe even gold, glint faintly when light catches them just so. Fragments of devotion remain. It is said that offerings placed with intention carry something beyond material value, that they hold the breath of the giver. Beneath the silence of the river, these objects still carry that quiet imprint. Was the tomb hidden to protect it? Some believe that the builders intended it to remain untouched, sealed in darkness for eternity. That proximity to the river was symbolic, a final crossing into unseen realms. Others whisper of a forgotten flood, a season when rains did not cease and the river swelled beyond its banks, claiming fields and temples alike. Perhaps the water entered gradually, inch by inch, until the chamber was filled and the air within dissolved. But the water feels less like an intruder and more like a guardian. It wraps the tomb in soft obscurity. It filters harsh light into gentle shimmer. It slows decay. In some quiet way, it preserves. As we move through the chamber in imagination, everything becomes deliberate. The flicker of light, the rhythm of breath behind a diver's mask, the subtle sway of aquatic plants near the entrance. Time itself feels fluid here. On land, stone erodes under sun and wind. In water, it changes differently. Surfaces grow smooth, edges blur. What was once sharp becomes forgiving. Fish pass through the doorway as though unaware of its sacred origin. Their silver bodies reflect beams of light, momentarily illuminating carvings long hidden from human eyes. They do not disturb the offerings. They simply weave among pillars, part of a new ritual written by current and scale. Beneath the silence, we sense layers. The first layer, the intention of those who built the tomb, their belief in continuity, in reverence, in marking the passage from life to whatever lay beyond. The second layer, the moment of water's arrival. Whether sudden or slow, it transformed the chamber, replaced air with liquid, replaced flame with shimmer. The third layer, centuries of quiet guardianship. The river flowing above, season after season, flood and drought, empire and collapse. Names rising and fading on the banks while below, the tomb remained untouched. In this submerged sanctuary, drama dissolves. There is no conquest here, no looting, no display, only stillness and movement intertwined. We drift toward the central platform once more. If there is a body within the stone, it has long since returned to elements. If there were scrolls, they have softened into fibers indistinguishable from silt. Yet meaning does not vanish so easily. It lingers in the placement of pillars, in the careful alignment of the chamber, in the decision to build beside a river whose song would never cease. It is said that water remembers the shape of what it touches, that every stone it flows over carries a faint echo of its form. Perhaps the river remembers the tomb. Perhaps it carries fragments of its story downstream, whispering to reeds and fish and distant shores. Or perhaps the chamber was never meant to be found. Perhaps its builders understood that true preservation lies not in visibility, but in concealment, that what is veiled may endure beyond the reach of hands and ambition. As we ascend slowly back toward the surface, the chamber recedes into green twilight. The pillars grow faint, the offerings dissolve into shadow, light grows brighter above. We break through the surface, and the world resumes its ordinary rhythm. The river glides past as though nothing rests beneath it. Sunlight dances, birds call, the shore remains unchanged. And yet, we know. Beneath the quiet current, beneath layers of drifting silt and filtered light, a sacred chamber waits. It is not restless. It does not seek rediscovery. It simply abides. Its silence does not demand answers. It invites us to float with uncertainty, to trust that what is hidden is not always lost. As evening approaches in our imagining, the river darkens once more. The moon casts a silver path across its surface. Somewhere below, that pale light trembles faintly upon carved stone, touching pillars and offerings in a language without words. The tomb remains in shadow, cradled by current. And perhaps that is enough. For some truths are meant to be submerged. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And beneath the flowing breath of the sacred river, time moves on, soft, patient, forgiving, carrying both memory and forgetting toward the open sea. There is a moment, just after sunset, when the desert forgets its heat. The wind softens, the horizon turns violet, and high within the cliffs, where stone meets sky, a city begins to glow. It does not rise from the earth like other cities. It does not spread across plains or gather beside rivers. Instead, it emerges from the mountain itself, as though shaped not by hands alone, but by moonlight and patience. Facades shimmer rose and amber in fading light. columns, arches, stairways, each carved directly into living rock. Doors open into cool interior shadow, dark mouths leading inward, inward, inward. It is said that those who first beheld it at dusk believed it was not built at all but revealed, as though the mountain had always contained a hidden city waiting for the right century to breathe. Who carved entire streets into stone? And why here, between wind and horizon, between caravan trail and endless sand? Let us approach slowly. The cliffs rise sheer and immense, their faces marked by time and subtle veins of mineral color. Yet within those faces are deliberate shapes, rectangular thresholds, triangular pediments, spiral motifs etched into sandstone, not added to the mountain, but extracted from it. The city was not assembled, it was uncovered. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are people who believe that mountains hold memory, that within their layered stone lies the echo of oceans, of forests, of ancient seashells compressed into silence. To carve into such stone is not only an act of construction, it is an act of listening. We step into a narrow passageway, its walls cool beneath imagined fingertips. The air changes immediately. Outside, wind whispers across the plateau. Inside, sound deepens. Footsteps echo softly, returning to us like distant thoughts. Homes once opened along these corridors. Small chambers carved with care, niches in the walls for lamps or sacred objects. Above, narrow shafts allowed threads of daylight to descend like golden breath. It is said that incense once drifted through these passages. Resin from distant trees carried along caravan routes that crossed continents. Traders arrived here bearing spices, silks, scrolls filled with foreign script. The city was not isolated. It pulsed with exchange. We move further inward. Temples stand beside dwellings, their facades grand and symmetrical. Tombs lie beyond, marked by monumental entrances framed with columns and star-marked patterns. All are carved from the same mountain. All are part of the same body of stone, as though the city never arrived, but was always present. Some believe this place flourished 2,000 years ago, at the height of desert trade, that it served as a crossroads where empires brushed against one another, exchanging goods and ideas beneath open sky. The people who lived here mastered the art of survival in a harsh landscape. They channeled rainwater through hidden conduits, storing it in cisterns carved deep into rock. They understood the spiral of seasons and the language of wind. Yet beyond practicality, there was artistry. Facades rise several stories high, adorned with carved urns and celestial motifs. The symmetry is deliberate, the proportions measured. And yet, there is restraint. The interior chambers remain simple, almost austere. Why such grandeur at the threshold and such simplicity within? Whispers tell us that the doorway is a transition, a space between worlds. The outer face announces presence to the horizon. The inner chamber invites contemplation. We pause at the entrance of a tomb, carved deep into the cliffside. The doorway towers above us, framed by pillars that have endured centuries of wind and sand. Inside, the chamber is cool and dim, the floor smooth, the walls plain. Perhaps once there were inscriptions here, names, prayers, genealogies. If so, they have softened into indistinct lines, crumbled by time's quiet hand. Was this city built for the living or for the dead? Some believe it was both. That daily life unfolded beneath the gaze of ancestors resting within stone chambers. That death was not hidden away, but integrated into the rhythm of the city. As night gathers in our imagining, stars begin to appear above the cliffs. Their light touches the upper facades first, then slowly descends. The city seems to awaken under starlight rather than sunlight. Its carved surfaces glow softly, marked by the moon. There is something lunar about this place. The stone, pale and warm by day, becomes silver and hushed by night. Shadows deepen within doorways. Columns cast long, gentle silhouettes against the cliff face. We wander through a central plaza where sand has gathered in shallow drifts. Once, perhaps, this space echoed with voices, children running between pillars, traders bargaining, priests chanting within temple chambers. Now only wind passes through. Was it conquest that emptied these halls? Some believe invading armies swept across trade routes, redirecting wealth and attention. Others suggest drought, the slow and merciless retreat of water sources that once sustained life here. Perhaps the cisterns ran dry. Perhaps caravans chose alternate paths. Perhaps the unraveling was quieter than legend suggests. Cities do not always fall with thunder. Sometimes they exhale. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, life shifts elsewhere. A family leaves, then another. Markets thin, temples close, and one day the last lamp is extinguished. The city remains, but emptied of breath. Sand begins to drift into corridors, doors collapse, roof beams where they existed decay, and yet the facades endure, carved from the mountain itself. In this way, the city becomes both ruin and revelation. Each doorway now feels like a threshold between eras. Step through it, and you are suspended between past and present, between what was spoken here and what will never be spoken again. The air is dry, yet heavy with memory. We sit for a moment upon a stone ledge overlooking the valley below. The desert stretches vast and silent. The horizon glows faintly beneath rising stars. It is said that those who built this city did so not to dominate the landscape, but to belong within it. To carve into stone is to accept its permanence. To align architecture with cliff and canyon is to acknowledge that human presence is temporary, but the mountain endures. The city carved from night does not collapse into rubble. It remains etched into earth, as though held by the desert itself. And perhaps that is its quiet lesson, that some places are not abandoned, they are asleep. The silence here does not feel violent, it feels contemplative, as though the city has simply withdrawn into itself, resting within its own carved chambers. The stars above shimmer in vast patterns, the same constellations once watched over caravans approaching from distant lands, the same moon illuminated festivals and funerals alike. Time has passed. Empires have risen and crumbled, yet the city remains, its columns upright, its facades luminous under night sky. It stands as a monument to patience, to the human desire to leave an imprint upon the earth, not by building upward into clouds, but by carving inward into stone. We rise slowly and begin to depart. As we move through the narrow passageways one last time, our footsteps echo gently, the sound fades quickly, absorbed by rock. The wind resumes its quiet wandering through corridors and over thresholds. At the edge of the plateau, we turn for a final glance. Under starlight, the city appears less like ruin and more like memory made visible. Its carved faces seem almost serene, as though content to remain here, suspended between night and dawn. Perhaps it was never meant to endure as a living city forever. Perhaps it was always meant to become what it is now, a pause in stone. A reminder that even when voices fade and markets fall silent, the gesture of carving remains. The act of shaping earth with intention lingers long after the hands themselves return to dust. As sleep approaches, we carry with us the image of that mountain city, glowing softly beneath celestial sky. Some places are not lost. They are listening, waiting beneath layers of wind and memory. And in their silence, marked by the moon, we find not emptiness, but a gentle, enduring echo. There is a temple that stands where the hills fold inward, where evening gathers like a soft shawl around stone. At dusk, incense rises from its courtyards in pale spirals. The columns glow amber beneath the last light of the sun. Oil lamps flicker in niches along the walls, their flames steady, their breath almost imperceptible. Deep within this temple, beyond the outer hall, beyond the carved reliefs of gods and constellations, there is a smaller room. It is said that this room was once concealed behind heavy curtains, thick and embroidered with star-marked threads. The fabric shimmered faintly in lamplight, a veil between question and answer, between mortal uncertainty and something more veiled still. Our journey begins with a whisper. Who spoke from behind the veil? We stand at the threshold of the outer hall. The floor beneath our imagined feet is cool stone, worn smooth by centuries of sandals. Pilgrims once gathered here, clutching offerings wrapped in linen, small bowls of oil, carved figurines, simple scrolls inscribed with prayers. They came from distant valleys and coastal cities. Some traveled for weeks beneath open sky. They carried questions like hidden embers within their chests. Should we wage war? Should we cross the sea? Will the harvest survive the coming winter? Does the path I walk honor the unseen? It is said that kings stood where peasants stood, that wanderers brushed shoulders with nobles beneath the same carved ceiling. In forgotten corners of the earth, there were moments when hierarchy softened, when all voices trembled equally before mystery. The oracle's chamber lay beyond. We move slowly through the scented corridors in imagination. The air is warm, thick with incense and breath. Murmured prayers rise and fall like an oceanic tide. Oil lamps flicker against painted walls, where celestial patterns spiral in muted colors. The temple does not rush. Every step feels deliberate, as though time itself slows within these walls. At the end of a narrow passage, the curtains hang, heavy, veiled, almost luminous in shadow. Behind them a small chamber waits. No throne stands within. No towering statue dominates the space. Only a simple seat, perhaps, or a low platform carved from stone. It is said that those who entered never saw the oracle clearly. The veil remained drawn. The voice that answered questions emerged from shadow, shaped by unseen lips. Was the voice divine or human? Some believe the oracle was a priestess, chosen for her sensitivity to subtle currents of thought. Others whisper that the chamber itself amplified intuition, that beneath the silence of thick stone walls, the human mind could hear its own deeper rhythms. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps the sacred resides not in certainty, but in the meeting of breath and belief. Pilgrims would approach the curtain one at a time. They would kneel or bow, offering their question into the dimness. Silence would follow, long enough for the heart to grow louder in the ears. Then the voice would come, not thunderous, not commanding, soft, measured, sometimes cryptic, fragments of guidance that shaped decisions far beyond the temple's walls. It is said that entire wars were delayed because of a single whispered phrase, that voyages were undertaken because the oracle spoke of favorable winds, that marriages were sealed, treaties broken, journeys begun, all in response to words that no one ever wrote down. No transcript remains, only second-hand echoes. Whispers tell us that ambiguity was part of the ritual, that the oracle rarely spoke in clear declarations. Instead, she offered symbols, images. Follow the river where it bends twice, or trust the star that rises before dawn. Such words could be interpreted in many ways, and perhaps that was the point. Why hide the speaker? Why cultivate silence before revelation? We step closer to the veil in our imagining. Its fabric shimmers faintly, threads catching lamplight like distant constellations. Behind it, the chamber is small, the ceiling low, the air thick with incense. The concealment is intentional. Some believe that by veiling the oracle, the temple shifted attention away from the person and toward the presence. The pilgrim was not meant to see a face, to measure expressions, to anchor meaning in human features. Instead, the voice emerged as if from nowhere, from everywhere. Beneath the silence, imagination awakened. It is said that doubt and faith lived side by side within these walls, that even those who served the temple questioned what they heard. Was it prophecy? Was it intuition shaped by ritual? Was it simply wisdom spoken with authority? The chamber itself becomes the mystery. For in many traditions, sacred space does not guarantee divine speech. It guarantees focus. It gathers attention like a lens gathers light. We imagine the oracle seated behind the veil, breathing slowly. Perhaps she listened to the pilgrim's tone, to the tremor in their voice. Perhaps she closed her eyes and waited for images to arise. Stars, rivers, storms. Or perhaps she understood something deeper, that those who came already carried their own answers, buried beneath fear. In this way, the oracle did not impose destiny. She revealed possibility. We sit now in the outer hall, long after the crowds have dispersed. The lamps burn low. The incense thins into faint spirals. The curtains remain drawn, though no voice speaks tonight. The temple breathes softly. It is said that even when the oracle fell silent, whether through death, exile, or the slow unraveling of belief, the chamber remained intact, curtains replaced, lamps tended, the space preserved, even when prophecy ceased. Why preserve an empty room? Perhaps because emptiness itself had become sacred. Where memory fades, architecture remembers. The carved columns still hold the echo of questions once asked. The stone floor retains the warmth of kneeling bodies. The air, though centuries changed, carries a subtle weight. The power may never have been in prediction. It may have been in pause, in the long breath before the voice answered, in the sacred uncertainty that allowed doubt and faith to coexist without conflict. As night deepens in our imagining, moonlight slips through high windows, touching the edge of the curtain. The fabric glows faintly, marked by the moon. Shadows lengthen across the floor in gentle arcs. No one stands in line now, no offerings rest in waiting hands. And yet, the chamber feels far from empty. It holds something intangible, a residue of intention, of thousands of questions spoken into shadow, of thousands of moments when human hearts trembled at the edge of decision. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the oracle was never meant to be a source of absolute truth. Perhaps she was a mirror, veiled so that those who sought answers would listen more closely. To themselves, to the silence, to the subtle currents beneath thought. The veil shimmers once more in our mind's eye. We do not part it. We do not step beyond. We simply stand in the outer hall, aware of the space that exists just out of sight. The temple remains dim, breathing softly in memory, holding secrets that never needed to be proven. And as we turn to leave, the scent of incense lingers faintly in the air. The oil lamps flicker one by one into darkness. The curtain settles into stillness. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, what lay behind it. Perhaps the true revelation was the space itself, the quiet chamber where doubt could kneel beside belief without shame. As sleep approaches, we carry with us the image of that veiled room, small, sacred, unresolved. Some mysteries do not demand answers. They ask only that we enter gently, listen deeply, and depart without tearing the curtain. And in that softness beneath the silence, the oracle still whispers. A parchment unfolds beneath candle glow. Its edges are curled like autumn leaves, browned by time and touched by countless hands. The wax of the candle pools softly at its base, the flame leaning and straightening with each quiet breath in the room. Beyond the circle of light, darkness waits, vast and patient. Across the parchment, inked in careful lines, are coastlines and mountains. Rivers curl inward like sleeping serpents. Small ships, no larger than a thumbprint, float upon painted seas. And above it all, scattered in faint golden points, are constellations, star-marked patterns stitched into the margin of the world. The question lingers like smoke. How did they know what lay beyond the horizon? It is said that maps were once acts of faith, that to draw a coastline was to confess belief in land not yet seen. In forgotten corners of the earth, before the age of iron instruments and measured grids, sailors trusted the sky more than any compass. The parchment trembles slightly as a hand steadies it. The fingertips are rough, calloused by rope and salt. A sailor leans close, tracing the inked path from harbour to open sea. The map is more than navigation. It is belief made visible. We imagine the room where this map was born. A chamber near the docks, perhaps, where the scent of tar and ocean lingers even through closed shutters. A table worn smooth by elbows and ink stains. Scrolls stacked in careful disorder. Shells and stones placed as paperweights, holding the edges flat against wandering drafts. A cartographer bends over the parchment. His quill moves slowly, deliberately. He has never seen all that he draws. Some coastlines he sketches from memory. Others he pieces together from stories, whispers from sailors returned from distant voyages. Whispers tell us of islands shaped like crescents, of mountains that glow red at sunrise, of shores where birds outnumber men. The cartographer listens. He translates breath into line, rumour into coastline. He marks the known with steady ink and the unknown with delicate flourishes, sea serpents, spirals of wind, celestial symbols. It is said that in those early centuries of oceanic travel, the stars were the true guides. Mariners memorized their patterns, charted their slow rotation across seasons. The North Star, unwavering. The Southern Cross, a celestial compass. The moon, marked by its waxing and waning, whispering of tides unseen. And so the map does not confine itself to land. Above the drawn continents, constellations hover, mapped alongside coastlines as though earth and sky were reflections of one another. A river on parchment echoes a spiral in the heavens. A mountain range aligns with a chain of stars. To sail was to read two texts at once, one beneath the feet, one above the mast. We drift now into imagination. A wooden deck creaks beneath moonlight. The ship moves gently, lifted and lowered by slow oceanic swells. Sailors stand at the rail, their eyes trained not on the water, but on the sky. The map lies below deck, rolled and secured, but its memory lives in their minds. It is said that some voyages began with more hope than certainty, that maps were incomplete, edges fading into blankness where knowledge had not yet reached. In those empty spaces, artists sometimes wrote warnings, "Here be dragons," or perhaps they drew only decorative spirals, acknowledging the vastness without attempting to conquer it. Some islands drawn upon that parchment were never found. Some shores appear twice, mirrored in error or imagination. Was the map a record of reality or of longing? Perhaps it was both. For what is exploration, if not the meeting of fact and desire? The sailor who leans over the railing at night, gazing at the star-marked sky, carries within him not only coordinates but dreams. He imagines new harbours, new markets, new languages carried on warm wind. He imagines return. The map captures not only geography, but yearning. We return to the candle-lit room. The parchment bears faint smudges where ink once ran under damp fingers. Tiny holes mark places where the page was pinned and repinned. A coastline slightly altered from one version to the next. An island added after a voyage, then scratched out in later years. Where memory fades, revision begins. It is said that ancient mariners often trusted their own senses above any drawn line. The scent of distant land carried by wind, the behavior of birds, the color of water shifting from deep blue to translucent green. And yet they carried maps, because to unfold a map was to unfold possibility. In forgotten ports, sailors gathered around such parchments like priests around sacred text. They debated routes. They traced with reverent fingers the curve of a bay they had once anchored in. They added notes in margins, small marks, barely legible, whispering of hidden reefs or fresh water sources. Over time, the map became layered with hands, not one author, but many, like the temple aligned with stars, like the tomb cradled by a river. The map, too, was a meeting place between human effort and something larger. There is tenderness in its inaccuracies, an island placed too far east, a mountain exaggerated in height, a shoreline softened into gentle curves where cliffs stood sharp. These are not merely errors, they are echoes of perception. The map drawn in starlight is less concerned with precision than with direction. It invites movement. It encourages departure. Above deck, the night deepens. The moon casts a silver path across the sea, a shimmering road leading nowhere and everywhere at once. The ship follows currents unseen, guided by stars older than memory. The sailor glances upward, matching constellations to those inked upon parchment. The same sky that guided ancestors now guides him. The same patterns that hovered above ancient temples now hover above open ocean. It is said that in moments of uncertainty, when clouds obscured the heavens and wind shifted without warning, sailors turned inward. They listened to the rhythm of the ship, to the creak of wood and the pull of rope. They trusted instinct, breath, intuition. In this way, exploration became inward as much as outward. For every coastline discovered, there was a quiet transformation within the traveler. Fear softened into familiarity. Wonder deepened into humility. The map, though fixed in ink, could not capture that. And yet, in its blank spaces, it allowed room for such change. We drift once more to the candle-lit chamber. The flame flickers lower now. The parchment lies open, constellations glowing faintly in gold leaf. Beyond the window, night settles over harbour and mast alike. The cartographer has stepped away. The sailor sleeps. The map remains. It holds within its fragile fibres both accuracy and imagination, both certainty and hope. It is marked by hands that trusted the sky. Perhaps the islands never found were not mistakes. Perhaps they were invitations. Perhaps the doubled shores were reminders that reality is often mirrored by desire. The map closes slowly, its edges meeting with a soft sigh of paper. The candle extinguishes. Darkness returns, vast and oceanic. In the quiet of night, we sense a truth both tender and uncertain, that the greatest journeys were always drawn first in starlight, before ships set sail, before ink met parchment, before horizons were crossed. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the map was never meant to be perfect. Perhaps it was meant to awaken longing. And as sleep approaches, we hold the image of that parchment in our mind, a fragile world etched in ink, guided by stars. The sea stretches endlessly, the constellations turn slowly, and somewhere, beneath the silence, the next voyage is already taking shape. At the edge of twilight, when the sun lowers itself into the horizon like a fading ember, a palace begins to shimmer. It does not shimmer because it is whole, it shimmers because it remembers. In the heart of a forgotten capital, where streets once carried processions and markets breathed with incense, there stands a palace of crumbled arches and open courtyards. Its walls are fractured now, its towers softened into silhouettes. And yet, in the hush between day and night, it gleams faintly, as though light still recognizes it. It is said that this palace was once lined with bronze mirrors, polished to celestial brightness, that walls were inlaid with tiles of lapis and gold, catching the sun in 1,000 reflections, that fountains sang in courtyards, their water spiraling into marble basins shaped like lotus blooms. Now wind moves freely through broken colonnades. But let us begin before the silence. Imagine the first twilight of its unveiling. The sky painted rose and amber, torches lit along terraces, courtiers standing beneath embroidered banners, the polished floors reflecting flame and silk and jeweled crowns, the air thick with perfume and anticipation. The palace was not merely constructed, it was declared eternal, declared invincible. Empires rose within its mirrored halls, Decrees were spoken from balconies draped in velvet. Scrolls were unfurled upon long tables of carved cedar. Generals stood rigid beneath painted ceilings where constellations had been rendered in gold leaf, star-marked across plaster skies. It is said that within these chambers, ambition moved like a silent tide. Decisions that would alter borders and fates were whispered beneath chandeliers of glass and bronze. Vows of alliance were made, sealed with rings and clasped hands, and always the mirrors watched. Mirrors lined corridors and audience halls, multiplying every movement. A single figure became 100 reflections. A king seated upon his throne saw not only his image before him, but endless echoes of himself stretching into polished infinity. Perhaps this was the intention: to magnify power, to convince the eye that authority was without end. But beneath the splendor lay fragility. For what is a mirror, if not a thin surface of metal and glass? What is a polished tile, if not stone shaped by delicate hand? The palace seemed permanent, yet it depended upon constant tending, upon servants polishing bronze, upon masons repairing cracks, upon fountains maintained so their song would not falter. Where memory fades, maintenance falters first. We wander now through the palace as it stands in our imagination, half ruin, half reverie. The courtyard lies open to the sky. Its fountain has long since dried. The marble basin is filled not with water, but with sand. The wind draws faint spirals across its surface, delicate as breath. Columns still rise around the perimeter, though some lean slightly, their bases chipped and softened. The walls that once held mirrors now display empty niches. Fragments of bronze remain, dulled and mottled, reflecting only fractured glimpses of sky. It is said that in its height the palace dazzled visiting dignitaries. They would step into its halls and lose their sense of direction, overwhelmed by light and reflection. The ceiling paintings shimmered with celestial imagery, gods, stars, mythic creatures caught mid-flight. But now the painted plaster has peeled in places, revealing rough stone beneath. Colors once vibrant have faded into muted earth tones. Where silk once hung, only torn fabric remains, fluttering faintly when wind slips through broken arches. The contradiction is gentle, yet profound. How can something built to last centuries dissolve into sand within a few generations? Was it invasion that hastened its decline? Whispers tell us of shifting alliances, of distant armies pressing at city gates. Others speak of drought, of wells running dry, of caravans choosing new routes. Perhaps the empire's foundation was less stable than its mirrored walls suggested, or perhaps decline was slower, quieter. A corridor left unrepaired, a fountain allowed to dry, a tapestry removed and never replaced. Empires do not always shatter, sometimes they thin, like silk worn by time. We step into the grand hall. The floor remains mostly intact, though cracks run through its once flawless surface. If we close our eyes, we can almost hear footsteps, measured and echoing. The rustle of robes, the soft murmur of advisors leaning close to whisper counsel. What decisions were made here? What vows spoken beneath painted skies? Did the ruler believe his reign would outlast memory? Did those who bowed before him sense the fragility beneath polished stone? The mirrors, once reflecting crowns and silk, now reflect only sky. Through a gap in the roof, the evening deepens. A single star appears, faint at first, then steady. Its light touches a fragment of bronze on the wall, casting a trembling glimmer across the floor. The palace feels almost translucent now, as though it were less a structure and more a projection, memory layered upon desert air. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are ruins that do not feel defeated. They feel contemplative. The palace of mirrors and sand stands among them. It does not rage against its decay. It does not plead for restoration. It simply stands. Wind moves through corridors where courtiers once passed. Sand gathers in corners where musicians once played. The air carries no incense now, only dust and the faint scent of stone cooling beneath night. And yet, beneath the silence, something endures. Not marble, not bronze, but echo. The echo of ambition, the echo of ceremony, the echo of human longing to build something that will outlast breath. We move toward a balcony overlooking the city below, though the city itself is now little more than scattered foundations and winding streets reclaimed by earth. The horizon glows faintly as dusk deepens into night. The palace once commanded this view. Now it shares it with wind and stars. It is said that in its final years, only a few remained within its walls, servants tending empty rooms, a ruler aging in chambers once filled with counsel, the mirrors untended, tarnishing slowly. Perhaps the last inhabitant stood in the great hall and saw his reflection dimmed, fractured, multiplied into ghostly shapes. Perhaps he understood then that grandeur is a fleeting guest. We walk once more through the courtyard. The sand shifts beneath our imagined steps. A single tile, still intact, catches moonlight. Its surface glows softly, as if recalling the days when it caught the full blaze of noon. The palace does not weep for what it has lost. It releases. Stone to dust, bronze to tarnish, color to memory. As night settles fully, the structure seems to dissolve into shadow. Only outlines remain. Arches traced in silver, columns standing like sentinels against the sky. It leaves us with a quiet awareness. That permanence was never in marble, not in mirrored halls, not in proclamations of eternity. The true permanence lies in the quiet echo left behind, the way a place reshapes those who walk through it, even centuries later. Perhaps it was never meant to endure unchanged. Perhaps it was meant to remind that power gleams brightest at twilight, that reflection multiplies illusion, that sand, patient and soft, eventually reclaims all surfaces. As we depart slowly from the palace, the wind carries grains of dust across the floor. They settle gently, filling cracks, softening edges. The mirrors no longer hold faces, they hold sky. And beneath that vast celestial canopy, the palace rests. Not as ruin alone, but as pause. A luminous pause in stone, marked by the moon, waiting without urgency. And as sleep gathers around the edges of thought, we carry with us the image of that shimmering structure, half memory, half sand. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some palaces are not monuments to power. They are lessons in impermanence, and in their fading glow we find a gentler kind of eternity. There is a gate of bronze set within an old city wall. By day it appears unremarkable, weathered, darkened by time, its surface etched with faint spirals and celestial patterns nearly erased by years of wind and dust. But at twilight, when the sky softens into indigo and the first stars awaken, the gate seems to breathe. It is said that behind this gate lies a garden no longer marked on any map. The hinges creak open in imagination, slow and resonant, like a long-held breath released. Beyond it, the noise of the city dissolves. Footsteps soften. Voices fade into distant murmur. What remains is stillness. A garden unfolds within stone walls. Water channels glimmer in moonlight, tracing geometric paths across the earth. Cypress trees rise tall and slender, like silent sentinels guarding a sacred center. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of blossoms that open only at night. The opening image is not grandeur but balance, a space shaped for contemplation. Who planted these trees? Who stood at the threshold centuries ago, deciding that within the chaos of walls and markets, there must be a sanctuary of symmetry and breath? In forgotten corners of the earth, gardens were not mere decoration. They were metaphors, symbols of order carved gently into wilderness, reflections of celestial harmony rendered in soil and water. We step onto a narrow stone path, its edges softened by time. The geometry is deliberate. Straight lines intersect at precise angles. Beds of herbs and flowers form quiet quadrants. A central fountain rests at the heart, its basin carved from pale stone. It is said that water once flowed continuously here, guided by hidden channels beneath the soil. Drawn from distant aqueducts, it moved through the garden in gentle streams, whispering against stone. The sound of water is subtle now, imagined, remembered, yet it lingers in the mind like an oceanic echo. We walk slowly. Cypress trees cast elongated shadows across gravel paths. Their dark silhouettes stretch toward the sky, as though reaching for the constellations above. Pomegranate branches curve inward, heavy with fruit in summer months long past. Who walked these paths in moments between power and solitude? Perhaps a ruler slipped away from the marble halls to breathe beneath open sky. Perhaps a poet wandered here at dusk, scroll in hand, tracing verses in quiet corners where fountains masked the sound of whispered thought. It is said that gardens such as this were places where political decisions softened into philosophy, where alliances were considered not under chandeliers but beneath leaves trembling in moonlight, where ambition paused, if only briefly, before resuming its march. Beneath the silence, conversations once unfolded. Poetry was recited here, not loudly, not for applause, but as offering. Words shaped like petals, falling gently upon attentive ears. Perhaps secrets were exchanged beneath pomegranate branches, promises murmured between friends, confessions released into air scented with jasmine. The garden held them all. It absorbed tension and returned calm. Its symmetry reassured the restless mind that even in turbulent times some order endured. We approach the central fountain. Though dry now in our imagining, its stone basin still bears the smoothness of centuries of water. At its center, a small column rises, carved with star-marked patterns barely visible in fading light. It is said that the 4 channels leading from this fountain once represented rivers of paradise, or perhaps the 4 cardinal directions, Earth's quiet compass embedded in soil. The garden mirrored the cosmos, the path from gate to fountain a journey inward. The quadrants, a reminder of balance. In this way, the garden was not separate from the world. It was a reflection of it, a smaller universe contained within walls. And yet, time seeps in. Irrigation fails when hands no longer tend it. Aqueducts crack, water sources shift. The delicate balance between human care and natural growth begins to tilt. Roots push gently against stone. Moss gathers along pathways. Seeds carried by wind settle into corners, unplanned. Where memory fades, geometry softens. We notice how the once straight lines blur into curves. Gravel is scattered unevenly. Vines climb walls once polished and white. The bronze gate, though still standing, has begun to tarnish, its surface mottled with green. The transformation is not violent. It is gradual. A leaf falls and is not swept away. A crack widens and is not repaired. A channel clogs and is not cleared. And so the garden shifts from cultivated symmetry to gentle wildness. But even in its overgrowth, something remains sacred. We kneel beside a bed of herbs, now overtaken by tall grasses. The scent of earth rises faintly. A single blossom pushes through the tangle, pale and luminous beneath moonlight. Beauty persists. It is said that long after the palace attached to this garden crumbled, the garden lingered. Travelers passing through the abandoned city would speak of a hidden courtyard where trees still stood in silent formation. Some would enter and sit in contemplation. Others would leave offerings, a coin beneath a stone, a whispered prayer into leaves. The garden became less a royal retreat and more a sanctuary of memory. As night settles fully, the stars overhead grow brighter. Their light filters through cypress branches, casting delicate patterns upon the ground. The geometry of the garden is no longer perfect, yet the sky above remains symmetrical in its own way. Constellations turn in slow spirals. The moon marks the passage of time without haste. The garden, though altered, still participates in that rhythm. It becomes a metaphor for memory itself, cultivated carefully in youth, tended with intention through seasons, and eventually reclaimed by forces beyond our control. Yet even when pathways blur and fountains dry, the imprint of design remains faintly visible, a suggestion of order beneath wild growth. We walk once more along the central path toward the bronze gate. The air carries the faint rustle of leaves. Somewhere, unseen, water may still trickle through hidden channels, not entirely lost. The scent of blossoms lingers softly. It is said that those who pass through such gardens carry something of them within. A quiet recalibration, a memory of symmetry that endures even when the world feels chaotic. We pause at the threshold. The gate stands open behind us, its hinges silent now. Beyond it, the city waits, stone streets, distant towers, the hum of unseen life. Within, the garden breathes. We step through the gate slowly. It closes with a soft resonance, not abrupt, not final. The sound lingers for a moment before dissolving into night. What remains is the echo of footsteps among leaves, the sense that beauty, even when fleeting, leaves a sacred trace. Perhaps the garden was never meant to be permanent. Perhaps it was meant to teach impermanence gently, through falling petals and shifting roots. In forgotten corners of the earth, walls crumble and empires fade. Yet the memory of a quiet courtyard beneath starlight lingers, and as sleep approaches, we hold the image of that hidden sanctuary, a space once shaped by careful hands, now softened by time. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some gardens bloom most vividly in memory. Behind the bronze gate, beneath the silence, the trees still stand, marked by the moon, breathing slowly in the dark. There is a ridge where the earth rises so high that clouds forget their direction. At dawn and dusk, mist gathers there like a silver veil, wrapping stone in soft obscurity. And on that narrow spine of mountain, where wind speaks more often than birds, a fortress stands. Its silhouette is faint against the horizon, walls emerging from fog, towers dissolving into pale sky. It does not gleam, it does not invite, it simply endures. The question drifts upward like breath in cold air. What were they guarding so far from the world below? No river runs beside it. No marketplace hums beneath its gates, only steep cliffs, winding paths, and the endless passage of cloud. It is said that the fortress was built in an age when valleys were contested and borders uncertain. That rulers, fearing invasion or betrayal, chose the mountain not for beauty, but for vantage. From its height, one could see armies approach days in advance. Smoke from distant villages appeared as faint threads against the earth. To build so high was an act of both caution and confidence. We begin the ascent in imagination. The path narrows as it climbs. Stone steps carved directly into rock twist upward in quiet spirals. Wind moves steadily here, brushing against cloak and cheek, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. With each step, the world below recedes. Villages become patterns, rivers thin into silver threads, voices fade until only breath remains. At last, the fortress reveals itself fully, stone walls clinging to cliffs as though grown from them. No elaborate carvings adorn its surface. Its beauty lies in restraint, in strength. The gate is heavy, bound with iron now rusted to deep red. Above it, narrow windows, arrow slits, peer outward like watchful eyes. Inside, life once unfolded. We step through the gate and into a courtyard open to the sky. The ground is uneven, worn by countless boots. A well stands at the center, its stone rim polished smooth by hands drawing water through seasons of sun and snow. It is said that families lived here, not only soldiers. Children once chased one another along parapets under careful watch. Women baked bread in stone ovens set against inner walls. Laughter rose into mountain air and dissolved into mist. Isolation was both shield and burden. The fortress offered safety from invasion, yet demanded surrender to solitude. Letters arrived rarely. News travelled on foot, carried by riders who braved treacherous paths and sudden storms. In forgotten corners of the earth, such strongholds became entire worlds unto themselves. Festivals were celebrated within walls, marriages blessed in small chapels carved into stone, prayers murmured in echoing halls where candlelight flickered against rough surfaces. We wander now through narrow corridors. The walls are thick, their stones fitted tightly together without ornament. Chambers open off the passageways, sleeping quarters, storerooms, perhaps a hall where meals were shared. The air inside is cool and still. We pause in the great hall, its ceiling arches modestly overhead. A long table once stood here, heavy and scarred by years of use. Around it, soldiers and stewards gathered, their voices low as they discussed patrols, weather, rumors carried from below. What did they guard? Was it treasure? Was it territory? Or was it simply time? Some believe the fortress was less about what it protected and more about what it represented, a symbol of presence in a shifting world, a declaration that even in remote heights, authority extended. Yet as years passed, the world shifted. Trade routes changed, favoring easier paths through valleys. Armies moved elsewhere, chasing different ambitions. Borders redrew themselves without consulting stone. The fortress remained, increasingly alone. We climb the narrow stairs to the highest tower. The steps are steep, spiraling tightly upward. Our imagined hand traces the inner wall, cool and steady. At the top, the view opens, if the mist allows it. Clouds brush against parapets like passing thoughts. Sometimes the valley is visible, vast and green beneath shifting light. Other times, the world disappears entirely, replaced by pale grey silence. It is said that on certain mornings, the fortress stood above the clouds entirely, like an island floating in white sea. Those within would look outward and see nothing but sky, suspended between earth and heaven. Such moments must have felt sacred and unsettling. Protection and isolation often share the same walls. In the early years, watchfires burned each night along the ramparts. Signals were sent to neighboring outposts, brief flares of flame against darkness. The fortress was part of a chain, a network of vigilance. But when neighboring outposts fell or were abandoned, those fires dimmed, one by one, until only this stronghold remained, a solitary guardian above empty paths. We descend once more into the courtyard. The well stands silent. Moss clings to its stones. A wooden bucket, long since rotted, has been replaced by nothing. In a small chapel off the main hall, faint traces of paint remain upon the wall, star-marked patterns around a simple altar. It is said that prayers were offered here not only for victory, but for endurance, for safe passage through winter storms, for the health of children born far from the comforts of the valley. Wind sings softly through arrow slits. The sound is almost musical, a low, oceanic tone that fills the chamber and fades. Time has worn the edges of steps and smoothed the corners of walls. The iron of hinges has rusted into brittle lace. The wooden beams that once supported roofs have darkened with age. Yet the fortress still stands. Not because it is invincible, but because it was built with intention, stone upon stone, layer upon layer. We walk along the outer wall. Below, cliffs plunge steeply into forested slopes. The path we climbed is barely visible from here, a thin line etched into mountain. It is said that some who lived here came to love the solitude, the way stars appeared closer at night, the way silence settled gently after sunset, broken only by wind. Others must have longed for the valley, the markets, the laughter, the flow of river. Perhaps both feelings coexisted, safety and yearning, security and separation. As dusk approaches in our imagining, The mist thickens. Clouds gather around the towers, softening their outline. The fortress begins to dissolve into pale grey silence. Walls fade, parapets blur. The highest tower becomes little more than a suggestion against sky. Suspended between earth and heaven, it feels less like a military structure and more like a meditation. What were they guarding? Perhaps they were guarding not gold or grain, but perspective. From this height the world appears fragile and vast all at once. Boundaries blur. The horizon curves gently. Human ambition seems small against endless sky. Perhaps that is why the fortress remains compelling even in ruin. It reminds us that strength and solitude are intertwined, that walls can shield and isolate in equal measure, that vantage can offer clarity and distance. The mist swallows the lower courtyard now. We stand at the edge of the ridge and let the silence deepen. No banners fly, no watchfires burn, only wind and cloud and stone. In this pale, suspended moment, the fortress feels less like a relic and more like a pause in the landscape, marked by the moon when night arrives, cradled by mist at dawn, patient in its aloneness. Perhaps it was never meant to guard something tangible. Perhaps it was meant to endure, an emblem of human effort reaching upward, seeking safety in height, carving permanence from mountain. As we begin our descent in imagination, the path disappears behind us into cloud. The fortress remains above, unseen but present. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some strongholds, though empty of soldiers and flame, still guard something quiet and essential, reminding us that even the highest walls cannot separate us entirely from the sky. As sleep gathers softly around the edges of thought, we leave the fortress suspended between earth and heaven, wrapped in mist, breathing in silence. And in that suspended stillness, time itself seems to rest. In a village square long overtaken by grass, a bronze bell hangs silent in a wooden frame. The wood is pale and weathered, its beams bowed slightly with age. Moss gathers where joints meet, wildflowers bloom where once feet gathered in morning light, and above it all, suspended by an iron hook darkened with rust, the bell waits. Our journey begins not with its ringing, but with the memory of its last vibration. It is said that on an evening thick with gold and dust, the bell was pulled one final time. Its voice rose across the valley, deep and resonant, spreading in widening circles over rooftops and fields. It echoed against distant hills and trembled faintly over river water. Then, gradually, it faded. The sound did not shatter, it did not collapse. It softened into dusk. And after that evening, it was never heard again. Now the rope that once stirred its voice lies frayed, coiled loosely at the base of the frame. Its fibers are brittle, bleached by sun and rain. No hand has gripped it in generations. The bell hangs still. Let us stand in that square as twilight gathers. Grass sways gently where cobblestones once formed deliberate patterns. The outlines of houses remain faintly visible around the perimeter. Low stone foundations, crumbled walls, doorways leading nowhere. Above, the sky is vast and star-marked. The first constellations appear just as they did centuries ago when villagers looked up at the same heavens. It is said that the bell once marked the rhythm of life. At dawn, its voice called the faithful to prayer or labor. At noon, it signaled rest. At dusk, it gathered families homeward from fields. In moments of danger, fire, flood, distant threat, it rang with urgency, its tone sharpened by fear. The bell was more than metal, it was a heartbeat. Its bronze surface still bears faint inscriptions, though time has softened them. Spirals and sacred words curve around its lip, etched by hands that believed sound itself could carry blessing. In forgotten corners of the earth, bells were believed to purify air, to scatter unseen shadows, to align community with celestial order. The casting of such a bell was a ritual, molten bronze poured into moulds carved with care, fire roaring, sparks rising like fleeting stars. When the bell cooled, it held within it the memory of flame, and then, lifted into place, it became voice. We imagine the village as it once was, children chasing one another across the square, farmers returning with baskets of grain, women drawing water from wells at the edge of town. The bell tower, though modest, stood at the centre, its presence steady and reassuring. When it rang, all heard. Its sound travelled over fields and into valleys, brushing against tree branches and riverbanks. It is said that even birds adjusted their flight when the bell spoke. Sound binds space. It marks time. It gathers scattered lives into shared rhythm. Why, then, did it fall quiet? Whispers tell us of war passing through the valley like a storm, soldiers moving swiftly, leaving behind ash and silence. Others speak of migration, of families departing one by one, seeking fertile soil elsewhere. Some suggest no catastrophe at all, only slow decline, crops failing, wells drying, youth leaving for distant cities. Perhaps the village exhaled gradually until no one remained to pull the rope. The bell did not choose silence. Silence arrived. We sit now beneath it, in the imagined night. Moonlight touches its curved surface, tracing faint patterns where hands once polished it. The iron hook creaks gently when wind brushes past. The wooden frame groans softly, as though remembering weight. The rope lies still. It is said that even after the village emptied, travellers passing through could sometimes hear a faint hum from the bell at dusk. Not a clear ringing, but a resonance, as though memory vibrated within bronze. Sound, like memory, lingers even after silence returns. If we close our eyes, we can almost hear it, not loudly, not insistently, but as a deep, oceanic tone carried on wind, a vibration that does not demand attention, but invites it. The bell once gathered people, now it gathers echoes. We trace its edge with imagined fingers. The metal is cool, slightly rough where weather has worn it. Inside, the clapper rests motionless, a small piece of iron that once struck with intention, again and again, shaping sound from stillness. There is something profoundly human in this mechanism, a pull of rope, a swing of metal, a voice born from contact. It required effort, community, presence. The bell could not ring itself. Perhaps that is why it feels sacred now. It reminds us that shared rhythm must be tended. That time, when marked together, feels different than time endured alone. The village square, though empty, still holds the imprint of gathering. Grass bends where pathways once ran. A faint depression marks where a market stall may have stood. Beneath the soil, fragments of pottery and bone rest quietly. Where memory fades, earth remembers. Above, the stars continue their slow spiral. The same constellations that watched over the village in its youth now shimmer over its absence. The moon drifts behind thin clouds, casting silver across bronze. The bell reflects only sky. In this quiet, it becomes less an object and more a symbol of shared time, of collective breath, of rhythm once known and now lost. And yet, is it entirely lost? It is said that children from neighbouring towns sometimes wander here in curiosity. They stand beneath the bell and gaze upward, wondering why it does not speak. Some reach for the rope, but find it too brittle to hold. Perhaps that is mercy, for to ring it now might fracture the fragile peace that rests here. As night deepens, the air cools. Crickets begin their own subtle chorus, filling the square with delicate vibration. The wind shifts direction, brushing gently against bronze. The bell does not move, but its silence feels full. Full of mornings it once announced, full of warnings it once cried, full of festivals it once crowned with joy. It leaves us listening, not for sound, but for the spaces between sounds. In the hush after crickets pause, in the breath between wind and stillness, meaning often hides there. Perhaps the bell was never meant to ring forever. Perhaps it was meant to mark a chapter, to gather a community for a time, then rest. As we rise slowly from the grass in our imagining, we look once more at the silent frame. The wooden beams lean slightly yet endure. The bell hangs steady, patient. It does not mourn its quiet. It inhabits it. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the greatest resonance of the bell is not in its ringing, but in its stillness. For in that stillness we become aware of our own rhythm, our own breath marking time beneath stars. The village square sleeps. The bell remains. And as sleep gathers softly around the edges of thought, we carry with us the image of bronze beneath moonlight, suspended between sound and silence. A heartbeat once shared, a rhythm remembered, a voice that faded into dusk, yet still hums faintly in the chambers of memory. Behind a modest wooden door, in an ancient house, there is a room that has not changed its mind in centuries. The house itself leans gently into a narrow street where stone walls hold the memory of footsteps. Its exterior is unremarkable, cracked plaster, a window veiled in dust, a roof softened by sun and rain. Nothing announces what waits within. It is said that some doors close without ceremony, and some never open again. Let us stand before this door in imagination. The wood is dark with age, its grain raised like faint ripples on still water. An iron latch rests loosely against it, worn smooth by hands long returned to dust. When the door opens, slowly, reverently, the air shifts. Inside, a small chamber waits, no grand palace, no towering monument, just a quiet room suspended in stillness. The opening image is simple. Dust motes turn in a single shaft of light descending from a narrow window high on the wall. They drift in slow spirals, luminous and unhurried. The floorboards are worn but intact. A chair stands beside a wooden table. On that table, a cup rests where it was last placed. Life interrupted, then frozen. It is said that history often shouts from battlements and marble halls. But here, in this room, history whispers. We step gently across the threshold. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of aged wood and something softer, perhaps dried herbs once hung from the ceiling beams. The walls are plain, their plaster cracked into delicate patterns resembling maps of forgotten lands. The chair is simple, carved from oak. Its seat bears the faint curve left by repeated use. A woven cloth lies draped over its back, faded to muted tones of earth and sky. Who sat here? Was it a seamstress mending garments by lamplight? A scholar tracing lines of ink across parchment? A child practicing letters in charcoal against scrap paper? The cup on the table is unadorned. Clay, perhaps. Its rim chipped slightly. A faint ring marks where liquid once dried. What happened here? Was it sudden departure? An urgent knock at the door? A hurried gathering of belongings? A promise to return by dusk that was never fulfilled? Or was it slower? A migration whispered through the town, neighbors departing one by one until silence thickened and this room was left behind. Whispers tell us of plagues that emptied streets overnight, of wars that redrew borders without regard for small homes, of economic tides that carried families toward distant shores, but the room offers no explanation, only presence. On the far wall hangs a small shelf. Upon it rests a single object, a folded scrap of fabric, perhaps once bright, now softened into pale memory. Beside it a small wooden box sits closed, its lid etched faintly with a spiral pattern. We do not open it. Some chambers are not meant to be disturbed. They are meant to be witnessed. In forgotten corners of the earth, archaeologists sometimes uncover such rooms, sealed by accident or intention. They speak of them in careful tones, aware that what they have found is not treasure, but intimacy. Here, the ordinary becomes sacred. A table, a chair, a cup left mid-gesture. The floorboards creak softly beneath imagined steps. Their surface bears scratches from years of movement. Perhaps a rocking cradle once stood in the corner, perhaps a loom, perhaps only silence. We kneel and trace the faint outline of a rug, long since removed. The imprint remains, a slightly darker rectangle where sunlight never touched. Where memory fades, absence speaks. The window admits only a narrow beam of light. It shifts slowly across the room as the day turns. For centuries, that beam has traced the same quiet path, from wall to table, from table to floor. Time has passed outside these walls. Empires have risen and crumbled. Languages have shifted. Roads have been paved and repaved. But here, within this modest chamber, the arrangement remains unchanged. It is said that when a space is left untouched, it becomes something like a vessel. It holds the final breath of those who departed. It preserves the subtle geometry of their lives. The worn floorboards remember weight. The chair remembers posture. The table remembers touch. We sit gently in the chair in imagination, though it remains empty in truth. The wood is cool, the air still. What conversations unfolded here? Perhaps secrets were whispered at dusk, when candles flickered and shadows stretched long across plaster walls. Perhaps laughter once echoed softly, contained within these modest dimensions. Perhaps grief lingered here too. Rooms do not discriminate between joy and sorrow. They hold both with equal patience. The silence is not empty. It is dense, dense with unspoken endings. The cup on the table draws our attention again. Its position suggests interruption, not completion, as though its owner intended to return after stepping outside for a moment. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in this state. Perhaps it was meant to resume its ordinary role in the rhythm of days. But history intervened, and the door closed. Centuries layered themselves quietly upon that closure. Dust settled, cobwebs formed, light continued its gentle arc. We rise and move toward the wooden box on the shelf. Its spiral carving is faint but deliberate, a symbol perhaps of continuity, of cycles, of return. We do not open it, not because we fear what lies within, but because the mystery is gentler than revelation. This room does not demand answers. It invites contemplation. It reminds us that history is not only carved in stone or written in scrolls. It also lingers in small rooms, in forgotten breath, in the sacred pause between one heartbeat and the next. In such spaces, grandeur dissolves, intimacy remains. As evening approaches in our imagining, the shaft of light fades, shadows deepen, the dust motes settle into darker corners. The room grows quieter still. It feels less like abandonment and more like suspension, as though time, upon entering this chamber, decided to sit down and wait. Outside, the world continues its turning. Seasons shift, leaves fall and bloom again. The house itself may crumble one day, its walls returning to earth. But for now, the room endures, not because it is monumental, but because it was lived in. It is said that some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. In this chamber, the echo is not of speech, but of presence, the subtle vibration of a life once unfolded here. We step back toward the doorway. The air feels heavier now, as though reluctant to release us. The chair remains where it stood. The cup rests unchanged. The wooden box waits without urgency. There is no grand revelation, only intimacy. As we close the door gently behind us, the latch settles into place with a soft click. The room returns to its patient vigil, and in that stillness, we understand something quiet and essential. Time does not always vanish. Sometimes it waits. It waits in small rooms and in modest houses, in worn floorboards and faded fabric, in cups left mid-gesture beneath a beam of light, and as sleep gathers softly around the edges of thought, we carry with us the image of that chamber, sealed, serene, untouched. A sacred pause in the long unfolding of history, marked not by conquest or decree, but by dust turning slowly in light. There, behind a modest wooden door, time stands still, not lost, not broken, simply waiting.